sewn before? Okay, nice. Great. All right, perfect. All right, so every sewing machine is slightly different in terms of how you actually run your thread through the machine and where your different mechanisms are, but there are some common similarities. Basically, if I was going to do this upstairs, all I would do is grab the manual off the wall. Michael has seen me do this firsthand and read it and then just get going. So it's pretty intuitive once you know what these kind of settings are actually doing. You just need to pay attention to whatever machine you have and their manual on how to properly thread it, because that is going to give you the biggest headache. So you have your thread, it's run through this tension that goes through the machine in its unique way. At the bottom, you have your bobbin. Thank you. All right. So I'm going to, all right, so your bobbin, there's a winding system that works. I may run out of thread mid through this assignment, so you'll have to see me do that. But again, it's all different to your machine. There's always a built-in threading mechanism for your bobbin. Once you put it into your system, and again, this is also going to be unique to your sewing machine, there's a particular way you have to drop it in, but for the most part, this is going to be identical. So once you have your thread in place, you can go ahead and let it go. You can hold on to your top thread, so it's coming through the machine. You just drop your needle by manually rotating it. What it's gonna do is it's gonna catch the bobbin thread and you can pull it up. Once it pops up, you can use your scissors or something to pull it through. And basically your goal is to have two threads coming out, one from your top needle and one from this bottom bracket. They should be aligned. From there, you can just kind of cut off your access just to make sure it doesn't get pulled back into the machine. But you always want to have like 3 inches of material of thread, just to ensure it also doesn't get pulled up back, because sometimes your top thread likes to jump back. All right, so other common material kind of components are going to be how you raise and lower your foot. There's always going to be a mechanism for that. Upstairs, they have a manual one in the back, but they actually have a quick mechanism by your knee. So if you move your knee to the right, it'll lift it up really quick, so you can do really fast sewing maneuvers. So it's pretty exciting that way. There's a pretty powerful machines upstairs. There's also going to be your thread tension. Your thread tension controls how tight it's actually making those threads. Depending on how tight you go, it might bunch up your material and almost make it puffy. Versus loose, it's going to be loose, and loose is kind of helpful for if you're doing flexible fabrics, so it still has some stretch in between those seams. The other thing that you can control is your width. So your thread width you can adjust. That's basically showing you the distance of your line, so you can control the spaces between each stitch. So what I recommend for people that are first starting out is you do a large width, because that means when you mess up, there's actually less threads you have to rip apart to restart. If you do a tighter one, you have a lot more little loops to go through. The other thing you can adjust is your needle position. So right now I'm in the central position. This is the most common sewing position, and it's like 10 millimeters to the right and to the left of the foot. So for the most part, when you're doing your pattern, you always want to leave 10 millimeters of excess material. I incorporate that for you on my pattern that I made for you guys. But there's some scenarios where you want to actually do a stitch that is closer to the edge. And rather than pulling your material over, what you can do is actually shift the needle. So if I hit this switch, it jumped over to the right by about 5 millimeters. And if I go to the other way, it'll jump to the left about 5 millimeters. So you can get either closer to your edge or further away from it, depending on what your needs are. So those are the basics of it. There's different stitches that you can do by editing these as well. I just keep it on a straight stitch. It's going to be the most common, and it's going to be the one that you're going to be using for today's class. So other than that, I can start jumping into the actual steps on how to make this. Material wise, I have an inside material and an outside material. When you pick your material, when we have plenty here for you to just choose from, or to at least practice on, even if you don't want it to be your final, I do recommend making multiple bags just to get better at it. I recommend using a mid-weight material and something that is non-elastic, so no stretchy materials. It gets a lot more complex. Even this material, because it's so thin, I mean my green material, it's very difficult to manage. And once you add elasticity to it, it becomes a whole other problem. It becomes very easy to, as you're pushing it through the machine, you accidentally pull one tight, and then you get to the end and all of a sudden you have this like 5 or 10 millimeter overhang when it should be lined up edge to edge. Any questions so far? Cool. All right, so the first step that I'm gonna do is I'm going to turn my fabric into a flex frame loop. So this is the bag that we're making today for the camera. Ooh. So I'm using it as a pinch pouch, but you can use your imagination on what you want this bag to be. The flex frame mechanism, you just give it a squeeze and it'll open right up. It's very fun to do. I'll pass it around so you guys can examine it. There's definitely opportunities to make adjustments. If you change this length here on the pattern, that will affect the height of your bag. If you want a very kind of stout, compact bag, maybe that's meant for loose headphones, even though headphones don't even have wires anymore, so it's not a big deal. Back in my day, that was a challenge. You can also adjust the angle, specifically the angle right here. You want to keep this one the same. You don't want to adjust this distance at all because that is calculated by the flex frame mechanism itself, so you can't go bigger or smaller or else it's going to get a little wonky. But if you change the angle so it's not 90 degrees and it gets fatter at the bottom, you could essentially have a more triangle-shaped bag. So those are kind of the two things you can adjust. You can make it from a square to a triangle, and you can adjust the height of the bag. I'm leaving that up to you, but I'm not going to grade you differently. It's just how well you effectively went through the steps. So right now we're making these flex frame tunnels that we're going to be using for the edge of the bag. I have one already done, so you only have to watch me do it once, and then this is the other one. So I've already used a this tape right here, Ultra Hold. It's a heat bond tape. In order to create my edge, I had pre-cut another one right here. I have my iron already heated. It's very hot, vintage, so it's not safe at all, but it looks really cool.
That stuff is the same as this roll of material. I got more heat set material for you guys. So that same stuff using the leather is the same idea of what he's talking about here. It's a flat, hot melt adhesive.
Do you mind if I move this?
Yes, I do not mind. That was, yeah, great.
He does.
I do mind a little bit, but I'll make it an exception.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So all I am doing is I'm gonna touch it just to get the heat bond started. Now that it's down, I can press it. It doesn't take very long for it to start working, especially with an iron that's running this hot. What you don't want to do is after you press down, start like doing actual iron movements, because what you're going to do is you're going to warm up the adhesive, and then you're just going to shift the paper off of it. So now the adhesive is going to stick to your iron. So you basically don't want this paper to move. Once it's cooled down enough for you to touch, you can peel it off. The paper backing to leave the nice adhesive behind. If the adhesive comes off, it just means you didn't get it hot enough. Now that you have it ready to go, what you're going to do is you're going to use your guide. So one edge is already folded to this dotted line. So I'm going to line it up here, and I'm going to fold the next edge to that dotted line on the other side. Again, this is all determined by the flex frame mechanism. So this is probably your most important step, and basically all your stitches are going to be based off of this, because you just want to make sure you have enough material to perfectly fit that flex frame mechanism. And that's kind of why I chose this assignment and this style of bag, is because it has the unique challenge of trying to fit a hard part inside of it, and that is a common theme, especially if you're doing an accessory, a fabric or a soft good accessory that needs to fit a hard good inside of it. So again, I'm getting it hot in one area. Once it's in place, I can press down. Now it's okay to move it around because I have two materials sandwiching the adhesive. So it's good, it's nice and hot, it's very crisp. The reason I'm using these heat bond tape rather than just sewing the seam is because it does a better job of keeping the entire edge down. If you just sewed it, there still would be a side that would kind of pop up. And when you push the flex frame mechanism through, it would actually catch that edge and then become much more difficult to get through. All right, so now that that is done, I'm gonna go ahead and make it easier on myself by doing a pre-sew. I recommend if you are going to like get into sewing, I recommend these. They're much easier to deal with than just needles. Needles, I constantly poke myself. So this is much easier. You can do as many as you want. I only need one really to make sure that I'm all lined up on the edge. So what I'm gonna do, because I know I'm gonna do another seam later on to sew this to the bag, and I don't want those seams to be overlapping because I could make a mistake and just kind of sew too far on one side. So I'm just gonna shift my needle over to the right. That'll give me the closest possible seam to my edge. Once it's in place, I'll drop my foot. And then what I like to do is I like to manually insert my needle into the material so that I know it's pinned down and it can't move, and then all my edges are still lined up. From there, I got my foot pedal. Depending on how hard you press it is how fast the machine's gonna go. So if you're nervous, just take your time, go slow. The only other thing that I haven't gone over on every machine is there's a reverse button. This reverse button is essential when you're starting and ending a stitch so they don't come undone. So your first stitch, you're gonna go, gonna turn the machine on. Then you're gonna go. After it goes a few paces, you hit the reverse button. You can go forward again, you can go back again. Typically, as long as you do that forward, backward, forward once, you're good to go. If you know that seam is gonna get a lot of use, a lot of pulling just over time, you can hit that a couple more times before you go, because it's just to strengthen that area.
So that's for both the start and the end of the stitch?
Yes, so that way nothing comes out. So now that I've gotten closer to my edge, I take off my little clip and I'll keep going. Now that I've gotten to the edge, I'm gonna hit reverse and then forward again, and then I'm done. All right, you can check both of your seams now. I always recommend your first stitch that you do on a machine. I got this one dialed in yesterday, so I knew I didn't have to, but your first stitch you should always go through with a test material, because there might be something wrong with how you threaded the machine or your bobbin tension, and that's gonna lead to an ugly stitch. A good rule of thumb is if your top stitch is ugly, there's something wrong with your bobbin, and if your bottom stitch is ugly, there's something wrong with your top thread. So just pay attention to the user manual on your sewing machine, and it'll tell you how to correct each one. All right, so now that these are made, I'm gonna take my top two materials. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put them, there's always a front and back to a material. I'm gonna put my fronts together. With sewing, you're always working inside out. So you always kind of look at the ugly sides first and then go into the pretty sides. Because the last step of this is gonna be turning your bag inside out, which offers a kind of unique building experience versus any other method. Not only are you dealing with patterns, you're working inside out and backwards. Cool. So I got everything lined up. My edges are the same. Everything's square. Yes. No, that's just flare.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how do you do that?
I will show you how to do that when I get to that step. You guys can add, again, whatever you want at that step. You can add D-rings, you could add handles if you want a very, very tiny handbag. I know you're a fan of that. So when we get to that step, I'll go over it, but it's entirely optional. I thought the tag just added a nice touch, is those kind of fine details that really make a bag look from a DIY to just a professional purchase bag. All right, so again, I got it all lined up. I'm doing to the edge of my foot. I have my needle in the center position because that's the math that I did when I made this pattern. We're basically sewing this red line now. So again, I'm gonna go forward, backward, forward. Pay attention as you're going to make sure your line is straight by keeping the edge of the material at the edge of the foot. You have little markings on your bottom plate so you can tell kind of the distance that you start from the side of your foot to how you end. In order to get your material out, you always raise the foot and then lift your needle to the highest position. That'll let you pull your thread. Can talk right there for a second. We've all been there.
He's also got fabric scissors. Those scissors are only for fabric.
That's right.
Don't use them for anything else.
That's
No paper, nothing, just fabric. They stay sharp, so when you're doing a clean clean cut, it is a clean cut and it doesn't miss a thread.
Yeah.
It's really, really important and it's beautiful to have sharp scissors.
If you have dull scissors, you're going to fray your thread, which is going to make it almost impossible to get through your needle. You're also not going to be able to cut a clean edge when you cut out your fabric. Connor has those really cool rolling cut in order to get a very straight edge. Are you admiring my knockoff Copics? All right. Cool. All right, so now that this step is done, I have a nice tight seam. This should actually be identical now to my inside material that I cut. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna come over here to my iron and I'm gonna flatten this seam that I just made. So I'm gonna pull the material apart and then I'm gonna start flattening it down.
This iron is scaring me a little bit.
Maybe I kind of like the design.
No, I keep getting scared that you're gonna burn yourself.
I like the way it kind of goes forward,
I like,
but I feel like it's also dangerous.
I like how it looks. I like it. It's skeleton. I like that. It looks like 80s.
I got it at a thrift store.
Oh, okay.
I thought you said like a random
All right. So now that I have this iron down and flat, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in this is fusible fleece. What the fusible fleece does, it makes the package feel a little bit softer. It also gives it a little bit more rigidity, so my bag can actually stand up wherever it is. This, again, is an optional step. I bought some of it that you guys are welcome to use. I actually really dislike this one.
You could probably use the felt for that. It's even harder.
Yeah, I think that might be better because this one, it refuses to adhere properly. So again, I'm using the felt. It's all lined up with my edges.
It's probably because it's just like that kind of material doesn't like to let heat go through it too much, so it may not just be melting easily.
So on fusible fleece or whatever you're using, right, there's always one side with adhesive, one side that's safe to iron, so make sure you're paying attention. Again, this is the back of my material, so it won't be visible. So I'm just gonna go in here with my iron. The rule was 10 seconds.
That changes with the iron.
It changes with the iron.
Right.
This is,
If your iron's cooking at 400 degrees and you should consider 10 seconds, it's very different than 200 degrees 10 seconds, right? So you gotta know what your iron's operating at.
Yeah.
You should probably do a test piece throughout this process. Have just a snippet of your material on the side. Stitch that first. See how your machine's working.
Yep.
Bond some to that. See how that's working. See what it takes to actually get those things to stick before you put it in your part and ruin it on your actual part.
exactly.
We call these trials. Like if your stuff's not working, you do some trials. And like your client's gonna wanna see those trials of like what did you try to do to get to the end result. So you give them the matrix of I tried X material, Y was Z material. And I tried with these 3 different adhesives. And out of all of this stuff, these ones didn't work and these ones worked. So we're gonna proceed with these ones. And you guys in your manufacturing process should find adhesives, either these ones exactly or manufacture something just like it.
Yeah. So oftentimes, especially with adhesives or if you're relying on a vendor part, you actually need to find at least 2 materials that do the job exactly how you want it done, just in case one vendor decides that they're not going to make that material anymore. Your client isn't screwed with a product that can no longer be made.
And that happens often.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, we don't make that anymore. What do you mean you don't make that anymore? Yeah, we just don't make that anymore.
Yeah.
So cool, start from square one, right? And that could happen like 2 years down the line after you're into the production, right? They're just like, yeah, we're not gonna make that anymore. Like your MOQ wasn't enough, minimum order quantity wasn't enough to keep the doors open, kind of thing.
All right. So now it's all ironed on. It should be stuck fairly well if your iron was hot enough and you apply the right amount of time. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew on my loops. So I'm going to go edge to edge on the center of the material. You could use your guide to help line you up.
Are you on the inside or the outside right now?
I'm on the outside of my material and my loops are pointed down. So the open edge is going towards the edge of my material. Outside, it's centered. I'm just going by eye. So I'm good to go. So now I've already done one seam my needle was pushed over to the right. Now I'm just gonna go the seam down the center. Again, I'm gonna drop my foot and then I'm gonna put the needle in to pin the material down. I could clip it, but I'm pretty confident going this amount of distance without a clip. So again, forward, backwards, a little bit more, just because I know that that seam is gonna get a lot of wear. All right, so that locks it all in. So now what I'm gonna do, and again, so the most important part about this whole project is just getting those tunnels right, because they are gonna dictate the rest of your bag shape. So if I sewed this on and it's not perfectly centered, you're gonna be okay as long as you can make sure that you do the same error on the other side. Or you can get your fancy seam ripper right here, which is probably the most important tool you can buy when you start sewing, because it just helps you. You would just go through, use the short edge that isn't sharp to catch your thread, and you can push it through the material, just making sure you're careful not to cut the material, just cut the thread. It'll basically pop everything until you could just pull it apart. This is used more often than not, sadly. And remember, if you don't end up with a pile of thread on the floor, did you really even sew anything? All right. Again, gonna drop it in. Drop that foot. Starting on the edge. Backwards. Good. All right, so now that my tunnels are sewn in, it's actually a really good idea to just check and make sure that my flex frame mechanism still fits. If you sewed too far on this side, you might have gotten your tunnel too small. So I'm gonna go in, grab my flex frame mechanism. There should be one for everybody with a couple left over. You should only need one. This is our flex frame mechanism, how it looks outside of the bag. There's also a locking pin in there as well, but we don't need that right now. So I'm just gonna go through. As long as I can get the front in on both sides, I know that I'm good to go. I'm not gonna bother shooting it all the way in because I wanna make sure that those edges that I use the tape on stay flat until the final moment. So I'm good to go. It still fits. Outstanding success. All right, so now it's gonna get even weirder because we're gonna start to basically stop seeing top surfaces. We're only gonna see in surface. So this is the front of my material, and this is the front of my outer material. So I'm gonna put them face to face. So now I'm only seeing the back of all my materials. Now we're gonna need a lot more clips.
We also provided like inner material for our bags.
So we provided material for you guys to use. You are welcome to get your own as well, if you don't like ours, which, whatever. Again, just my only recommendation is to try to get something mid-weight and something that is non-flexible. The reason I'm saying mid-weight is because I tried, there's actually like material in the N109 that's, it used to be a boat sail, which is super sick. I thought would be such a cool material to use in a bag, but it was just so rigid that I couldn't get it to actually flip inside out. So I got like all the way to that last step and I couldn't get it to flip. So I had to pivot. So what I did is I went to Joann's and they have a material cutoff section that's all 75% off, and I got both of these there for $9. I got a lot of it. So you can actually, I have this material here. You're welcome to dig through it and take what you need. Again, I will warn you that this kind of green material is so thin, it does pose a little bit of a challenge.
Here's a bag made out of a boat sail.
There you go.
If you wanted to check that out.
There is a part of the boat sail that does feel thinner. I just checked it today, that it might be usable. So I might go in there and cut off a little bit pit for myself because I think that bag looks sick. All right.
The machines upstairs are quite a bit more strong than your like mobile machines. Like they're,
Yep.
I think they're like $5,000 a pop. I mean, you've read them, but you can put. I put I think 7 layers of webbing through that, so like nylon webbing, this thick. When I tried it on my machine, it bent my needle every time. It wouldn't go through. So the sailcloth might work, and I think Armstrong's trying to use it for her class in some way, shape, or
No.
form.
Yeah, this machine was able to get through it. It was just the bag was so small I couldn't invert it.
So it's just that design.
Just this design. If you do a bag this big, you won't have any problems.
Yeah, so that's just learning as you go.
Yeah.
It just doesn't work for this application.
Yeah, and unfortunately, you do need to do a bag this small just to get this mechanism. If you do any bigger, the mechanism won't work. The only thing you can adjust is the height. So get even smaller. Or super long for some reason.
Wait, do you know what the metal hinge is made of?
Yeah, it's just flex steel.
Oh, steel?
Yeah.
Try spring steel.
Spring steel.
Spring shot.
For the material, would ultrasonic work?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it would work. I think it'd be fine.
Ultrasonic work is gonna be soft. There is stretch one way in ultrasonic, but it's not like a jersey or like a t-shirt.
Oh, no.
So you should be able to do it good. And I know there's definitely ultrasonic down in the other room. There's actually a box at the beginning of the semester is full of sewing supplies.
Cool.
So like different threads, there's already bobbins already wound, like that kind of stuff. So you can go in there and build it out, maybe that box at the end.
Great.
It's actually 1 of 9. Like the five of the box.
All right. All right, so I got my materials. Both of the outside faces are touching, so I'm only seeing the outside. Now I'm going to basically sew the same line I just did to get the tunnels on, but now with the other materials. If you're super skilled, you can do that all at once, but there's basically a bigger room for error of your tunnels moving. And since they're the most important part, I sewed them on separately, and now I'm doing this step over again. So again, foot down, drop my needle, forward, backwards. Oh, it doesn't want to go forward. Let's see if I can help it out. There you go. That might be an ugly stitch. We'll see what happens. Forward, there you go. Ended strong, started weird. But you don't see that seam, which is great, because you're going to turn it inside out. Yeah, if you notice, there's no visible seams on this. No visible stitches, I should say.
Graded on the non-visible seams.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're gonna like look inside the bag and look at all the.
Well, literally every single step results in a non-visible seam, except for one, which is hidden inside your bag. I'm not going to invert it, and unless like I see something went very wrong and I'm like confused how you got to that step, then I'll invert it and kind of inspect it further, just so I can give you advice on how to not do it again. But if for the most part, if your bag looks good like this, and I open it up and it looks like that, no, I'm going to call it an A.
So when you're back stitching like forwards and backwards, that like takes away the need to
Yeah, no knots.
not.
Yeah, I could show you some scrap material real quick, and I'll kind of compare the difference between doing that and not doing it. It's pretty drastic, but basically what you're doing is by sewing over the top of the stitch that you just did, you're essentially clamping it down to the material.
You can also think about it for your leather,
Where'd you
right?
put the
If
seam?
you don't finish your
Like-
stitch.
Can I see where you're...
Are you sewing up the very top?
Oh yeah, okay.
Very top edge.
Okay.
So I'm gonna do that on this side next, and then it's gonna get extra weird real quick. So I hope everyone's ready for that.
Makes sense. It's because I was like, I know you had the smaller part, but you clamped it down.
I'm so
to, like,
confused
where-
how this is gonna work.
No, those two ends come together, and then when you bro, I've never sewed before, so
Yeah.
Yeah, but the little loopy things are on the inside.
Is there any way you could sew the steel things so none of the edges are exposed?
The things that you sewed.
You need the edges to be exposed in order to drop the pin. Connor and I were just talking earlier, and he mentioned polycarbonate. It's a plastic. you can essentially sew those into place because you're using just basically 2 strips of plastic rather than a metal with a hinge. I just knew this was gonna work right off the back. It's a pretty cheap mechanism, so I went for it. Yeah.
We've used that same mechanism at work for like trying to make like a quick sunglasses case for like a client workshop. So you guys saw the one that was a clamshell that opened up. The other version was literally this, and we just couldn't figure out how to get it clean enough, quick enough to like make it worthwhile for the shop. It didn't show the forming process as well as the other one did. But we were able to figure out how to cover the hinges. It's just you gotta figure it out, right? I don't know how it's done. I'll just shut up here now. But he figured out the hinges covered.
Exactly. So today we're gonna learn how to do it clean enough to work at Billio. So we're all gonna get jobs at Billo. All right. So this is a stitch that I didn't do the back and forth on, and you can actually just kind of start pulling it apart like right away. So I've already ripped through half the stitch and with minimal force, and then I'll go through with this one and I'll do like a front and back thing. And the longer your seam, the quicker it's gonna come undone if you don't do it. So now, drop that. Forward. Okay.
Machines.
Once you guys get in the flow state, it goes really quick.
Yeah, like I was able to make this bag in 30 minutes. The first one, I did it even faster and I messed up so much. Yeah. So take your time. It's not a race, especially if you're a first time sewer. But now look, I can pull on these real hard now and they're not really coming out.
So when you made that first one, did you have the template, or was that first one in order to make the template?
No, the first one I had the template. What I was doing is I was purposely trying to go as fast as I can to see what could go wrong. And then that way I know exactly what to warn you guys about for the class. So you're welcome.
Oh, so you knew we were gonna rush.
I was a student here and I know that you have other projects.
So it's funny, just like went at it.
Yeah.
11 p.m. on Thursday at 1.
All right, cool. No, all right, any more questions before I get going?
Curious, do the machines upstairs, do they have the straight edge over the slide plates?
Straight edge over the slide plates.
The
I-
bottom cover? They have like the little measurements, because I know sometimes they have them.
They might have them. I do not believe they're installed right now. And I also think the middle one is the only one I got working. Yeah, so fair warning. The one on the back I never tried. The one on the front is a mess. So avoid the front one.
You'll find your favorite.
Yeah, you'll find a favorite machine. Just like I have a favorite bandsaw in there.
Valid.
That's what I was getting at. I was gonna say, if we wanted to align the stitching on the side with the stitching at the bottom, I'm assuming the distance from the edge to the inside has to be the same. Like, in order to, like, align this side one with the bottom one.
Yeah, so I did it really well on this side of the bag. Look at that. The stitching perfectly lines up. Beautiful. Did not do such a good job on this side though.
Oh.
Right, doesn't line up. So that is basically how I messed up because of how I boxed my corners. And when I get to that step, I'll kind of show you what that meant. It's great to achieve this. It's fantastic. If you want 100%, that's what you have to do. I did not get 100%. I still got an A, not to brag. I'm a little biased. But if your bag looks like mine, you're gonna get an A. You're gonna get a high grade. Yeah, and then basically boxing your corners is also a choice. So boxing my corners is what gave me this square bottom, so my bag can actually stand up. If my pins weren't so heavy, sometimes I can get it to do it. There you go. Yeah, it'll stand up. If you don't box your corners, it'll basically kind of look like this, just a perfectly square, and you may have some kind of like funky thickness, just because getting a square and then you fold your material, you get a little build up there. And then you wouldn't be able stand it. I'm showing you the boxing method just because it's a pretty simple way to have a bottom of your bag without having a different material that you have to sew in place. When you go into soft goods, they're gonna teach you how to make a different bag that has basically an edge all the way around it. So you have to fuse that material on the side. It's much more harder of a process. So I wanted to focus just on clean straight lines so we can get that down for the day.
I'd encourage you guys to try that way of finishing.
Yeah, I put it as a requirement in the assignment. I'm saying it's optional on your own time. All right, so now that these two are done, we're gonna get even weirder. But this is gonna be the step where you would wanna add your embellishments if you wanted to. Again, you're not gonna be graded on your embellishments, but that's where I added this fancy green tag just to make myself feel cool. You can also add, like I was saying, handles. You could add D-rings. If you're gonna add a D-ring, you would basically sew it to this material. So you'd have your, something similar to this if it had a clean edge on it. Fold it over like so with your D-ring in it, and then you would just sew it like that onto your material. I'm leaving that up to you guys to figure out just for this assignment, because again, I'm not gonna grade you on that. I'm gonna grade you on all these steps that I'm going over right now. The tag was as simple as taking a material like this. We'll finish ripping this one with my seam ripper. So that's what I was saying. You use the bottom edge, you hook it through, and you just give it a nice push, and then it's open. Lightning fast.
If you don't have one of those, you can take a Rizzo and break every stitch individually. And pull them out individually.
Yeah, and be very careful not to cut through your actual material. One thing to know is you can only sew and use a seam ripper so many times before your material just kind of falls apart. So you, like, again, don't be afraid to restart. The more you do it, the faster you're gonna get. This is my third time making the bag, so I'm going even faster. First time I went extra fast, second time slowed down. Now I'm kind of back up to that fast speed because I'm trying to talk and sew. Oh yeah, sorry. So for the tag, all I did was I took a square piece of material like this one. It was a little bit bigger than this, but what I did was I used my tape that I have, my heat tape. I folded it like this and like this. So my edges were then ironed down flat into this shape. So I had clean edges, and then I folded it again after that was all clean to make my tag. And all I did was I put that inside of here and attached it pointed inward, just like my handles are pointed inward, because whatever's pointed inward, when you turn it inside out, is gonna point outwards. And so I pinned that in, and then when I sewed this next step, I just sewed over it.
In between the layers, right?
Yeah, between the layers. But you gotta do a weird fold first. So here's the weird fold. So now you're gonna take your material and pull it like this. And you're gonna, what your goal is to line up your handles. That's what's more important. Even like, so like this edge isn't lined up, I don't really care as long as my handles are perfect. Because the handles are what dictates how well your flex mechanism is gonna be in the bag. Get it all nice lined up, nice and centered. Make sure I pull my inside material so it's tight and I don't have any accidental material still stuck in there. Once I got that on my handles lined up, looking good, looking sharp, I'll start pinning them. And I'm actually using these clips to mark the edge of my handles, like where they start inside the material, because I won't be able to see them. And this is the biggest mistake that I made, and it basically ruined my bag. I couldn't undo it after I did it. So the first time I made this bag, I ran through just using the spacer on the feet, trusting it and keeping it the whole way. But what I didn't take into account was my handles, and I ended up sewing over them and sewing them shut. So, by doing that, if you were to open them up with a seam ripper, you would basically, again, you would get a loose thread that then your whole bag starts to unravel. So you basically have to restart or rip the whole seam and go over. But by that time, my fabric was all tore up because it's so thin. All right, so that's all good. I know that this is the edge of my handle, so as long as I don't go sew on this side, I'm all right. So I want to stay on the opposite side. So now I'm going to pull my material and find its edge, and I'll do some clips there as well. Yeah. And the whole reason this is like so confusing is because of this internal lining. And that's really why I wanted to show you it. Because imagine this bag when you opened it and it's just a bunch of loose thread that's coming undone inside, right? Doesn't have the same effect. And I want to make sure when you design a product, you understand you have to pay just as close of attention to the inside of the product as you do as the outside. And that goes with anything, even outside of soft goods. If you do a nice desk, but you open the drawer and it looks hideous, you're gonna get some angry clients. Same thing with the fridge. Who wanted to design a fridge?
You don't know me.
Right? You gotta pay attention to what's inside the fridge just as much as outside.
Vegetables.
Somebody on their first day said they wanted to do a fridge.
What? Wasn't that Nina? No, I swear it was Nina because it was so surprising because I thought it would be Alec.
Hey, I support your fridge dreams. Whoever that was.
Dude, I want an old 1950s fridge with all those compartments. Wow.
That was pretty good. That was pretty good. All right, so I'm gonna start going. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna sew this seam all the way down and all the way through this material, just trying to avoid the edge of my handles, which I know are here. Again, if you were doing your tag, you would have that folded up piece of material in right here. So that's where it would go. Pointed inward. I'm not gonna do that for this step, again, because I'm just focusing on the ones that you will be graded on. I will not grade you on your tags.
So like, would you have to like hold it like with one finger until you get to the point where you go over the tag?
So what I do is you should sew up to the point where you want to put your tag in, and then just slide it in and then sew over it, and then you're good to go. So
That's the hard way.
hey, if you guys want to do it the hard way, I will let you. So just to be extra sure that I'm not going to sew over my handles, I am going to shift my needle over so it's going as close to this outside edge as possible. So I got it all locked in, drop my needle, go forward, backwards, forward. So I'm going, okay, I got to the point where I want to put my tag in, I can slide it in, or if you're doing a weird side handle because you want to hold your bag like that. I actually learned about this flex mechanism because I was watching a leather tutorial where a person made a whale, and the whale had a little mouth.
That's really what I want to do with the bag.
Yeah.
I want to make a fish. As soon as you showed it with like the mouth, I was like,
Yeah, it was super cool. That person did a great job.
So you could use the adhesive and just put that adhesive on the back of the tag. Iron it once.
really guys.
I'm giving that edge a little bit of a back right there just because, again, I know it's going to get some extra attention over time. And I want it to stay strong, stay bold. All right, so I'm going to keep going into my soft material. And this is where it's like, again, this material is so thin, it almost likes to bunch up on itself. So it's an extra challenge. I just liked it so much, I decided to run with it. All right, getting close. I'm gonna remove my clip. Go backwards, frontwards, and I'm okay. All right, so that's one side down. Whew. This is really the most important stitch of the day. Aside from just lining up your handles and getting them all right so the flex mechanism goes through. This is one that's gonna make or break your bag. You want to check your edge, make sure you didn't miss some of the materials. I got extra close to the edge on this one, but luckily did not miss anything, so my bag won't come undone. Everything's sealed. I can actually go in here and I can move my tunnels around so I know they're not sewed shut. So that's great. Awesome. Yippee for me. Yippee! All right. So now I'm going to do the same thing to the other side and hopefully do just as good of a job. Well, Connor's going to yell at me.
Me too.
I'll never get hired at Bill you.
No. So that's what that like outer edge is for, right? So
Yeah, so that what we were just talking about on the board, like the seam allowance, having the access material, that's exactly what it's for.
Okay.
Because you're losing 5 millimeters to 10 millimeters of material when you sew it together. Oh, fight me. Whew. So as you are putting it through the machine, you want one hand to be kind of pulling the material slightly, and the other hand is just kind of keeping it taut. If you push with your front hand, it's gonna get too loose and it's gonna get all wavy and bunched up under there. The machine itself pulls your material, so you're just following the speed of the machine. Cool, so I have made my bag. I should be able to, again, I didn't miss anything. There's no open holes. I can see that my stitch is on the outside of my handle, so my handle should still be open. Oh my gosh, I forgot a super important step. Oh my gosh, no.
Take a picture.
But I have my fancy seam ripper that I am going to save the day by using. No, so in order to flip this bag inside out, I have fully sealed it.
I was about to ask you, how are you gonna flip it? Because I was like looking at it, I was like, how are you gonna flip it?
No, yeah, I was like, oh, I'm gonna trust the process.
I was waiting for like a neat trick, and I don't know.
Yeah. If you know magic, now's the time to do
I
it.
was waiting for magic. I was like, wait, should we just take it out at some point? No, I was like, they're all.
Perfect.
I was like, are you gonna cut it or like? What's gonna happen?
I had to say, I think we saw it second time. Like, we're just talking
Backs and balls.
It's so cool. I kind of want to take it apart just to get
All right, so I'm being very careful to rip my seams and not my super thin material. So what I should have done, and it's actually in your pattern when you cut it out, is I show you where to put the space. But what I should have done is I should have stopped and back seamed a little bit. So what I'm gonna do is, luckily I don't have to redo the whole edge. I just need to open up and reinforce where I messed up and I went too far. But I'm gonna show you what that whole edge looks like if I were to do it correctly. You basically wanna leave 2 to 2.5 inches of gap in your fabric. So you basically make this like little pocket opening that you could pull. See how quickly this thin material is becoming de-threaded. So you really only get 2 chances and then you're done. So I'm gonna keep popping that thread. All right, cool. So now that it's open enough, here's what that seam should have looked like if I did it correctly the first time. So let's say I am coming down right on top of it. So I'm going like about 2 inches into my green material, my inside material. I come to the point where I want to stop. I'm going to backstitch it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to lift up my needle, raise my foot, pull my bag, those like 2.5 inches I was just mentioning, till you're down at the bottom. I'm going to drop my foot. And then now I'm going to do my stitch, forward, backward, forward, forward, backward. And I should be okay. And so now all you're gonna do is you're going to snip that long thread that you left on both sides of the material. And you're gonna be okay. We're gonna get through this together, guys. All right, cool. So everything's done. All right, now before we do the magic reveal, we're gonna box our corners. I'm just gonna cut away some of this excess thread because it's deteriorating on itself, because it did not like that I removed that stitch. All right, so to box a corner, what you're gonna do is you're gonna take all 4 sides, you're gonna pinch them together until you get a 90-degree angle. You can almost look at your fusible webbing, fusible fleece right there, and it becomes a perpendicular line across your main seam. Let me see, is this still going? It is, great. So for the camera. All right, so you're pushing your edge down, what you originally sewed, and now you have this small vertical or perpendicular line that you're going through. You're basically making a 90-degree angle by squeezing the edge of your pocket. So now you're gonna take that into the machine, and this is gonna be like the weirdest stitch ever. Right? So this is where I kind of messed up on one side. Basically what you're trying to do is you're trying to line up your bottom stitch with your side stitch before you start sewing, and that's what's gonna give you that clean line. And then after that, you just need to make sure that you're doing it a perfectly perpendicular stitch. I'm gonna switch my needle back to the middle position. It is important that you get the full range of material. So like don't start in the middle and like leave big gaps. So I'm gonna go, and I'm just gonna go all the way forward, all the way back on this one. And so that gives me my nice pocket. Now that I've made it, you can leave it and test it if you want, but I'm confident, I've done it a couple times. So I'm gonna cut that excess material off. And what that does is it just means when I flip it inside out, there's gonna be less like puckering in that area. There's less material in there that's gonna be trying to like force against it and push out. So now I'm gonna do that to all 4 of these edges. See, this is what I mean, the fusible webbing comes undone. I don't know if it's just because I'm using almost like an upholstery level fabric as my base. It kind of has a plasticky back to it. But that's just lesson learned there. Yeah. So I'm gonna do that again. Try to line up my side stitch with my bottom stitch. Try to make a nice perpendicular angle, and then I'm also trying to keep my overhang of my outer material flat. All right, so I'm gonna pull that, bend that over, get everything nice and lined up. I'm gonna cut away any of your excess threads because there is a risk when you go through a machine that it could grab them and get confused and kind of just suck them in. So just cut them away, keep them short as you go through, and you're gonna be all right. Again, trying to get a nice perpendicular line to my bottom and side. They're all lined up. Let's go for it, see what happens. And these is like, it's such a small, so basically the bigger your boxed seam is, the fatter the bottom of your bag is gonna get. But that's also going to basically, you're gonna lose side material. So you can have a really fat bottom, but it's gonna end up bringing your profile in, so it's really skinny at the bottom too. So it's really like, I'm going like a 1/2 inch, a very small amount on that corner. All the way through, all the way back, all the way through. Just trying to get that full edge fully buttoned down because I know the box seams are gonna get a lot of abuse too. Again, now I'm gonna cut off those excess area. So that's looking all right. That one's looking good. And now you gotta do the same thing for your inside bag or inside material. This time there's no bottom edge. So it's a little bit harder to eyeball, but it's also not gonna be super visible. So you get a little bit more leeway on this one. The outer edge, I want you to pay close attention to, be very careful with it. But the inside edge, you get a little bit more freedom. So again, trying to do that nice and pretty. You can use pins to kind of help keep things in place, or you can just struggle through it like me. And we're so close to being done with the bag. You're just getting so excited. See, that's where I was trying to warn you. This thin material does get bunched up. These box corners get a little wonky. So, like, I think a nice cotton on your internal lining would be a good material to go with. Originally, when I bought this, I was at the thrift store and I bought some other material too for internal lining. And I was like, oh, this is gonna be super sick. It was like the weirdest pattern I could find. But then when I went to Joann's to get the outer material, I found this soft, weird, thin green one, and I was like, okay, that's my new favorite thing. So.
It's a nice texture.
Yes.
Pretty nasty.
I like the color.
Thank you.
Nice sagey.
Nice sagey sage. Is that how you described it?
Wait, what?
You said a nice sagey sage?
Sagey sage. Nina, how tired are you?
Alright.
Wait, she kind of matched. I could have done
Cool.
it.
Alright. Whew. We did it. Everything's good. I'm cutting all my
You're back to the inner material.
my short. I got my box corners on all sides, which is great. I'm gonna pull all these extra little threads away. Make sure I cut them all. If there's any loose ones still hanging around. All right, now magic, as promised. What you're gonna do is you're going to start inverting the bottom material. See that my fleece is coming off? So I gotta be careful to keep it in place as I do this. Start pushing it through. Again, so this is where I got in trouble when I was using that too stiff of material. Is right here, because it was just impossible. I couldn't get it.
Roll it like a sock.
Yeah, it's almost like putting your sock inside out.
I don't know. I was expecting like
On a bigger bag, yes.
maybe.
On a tiny one, you gotta really struggle.
You do the same thing for backpack straps too, so it's like a long skinny tube. You gotta figure out how to turn those things inside out.
Yes, you did a strap and had to struggle with that, turning it inside out.
Yeah. Should be like pendants per.
All right, so now that that one's inside out, I'm gonna pull it through that opening that I have on the side. Careful not to unravel my edge more than it already is, because it's already a little destroyed. Okay, good, it's coming through. It's great, it's exciting. This is like the magical moment in all soft good designs, when you finally get to turn it right side out and examine how good everything is. So now I gotta pull your box corners, make sure they're all nice and tight.
That's beautiful tweed. Oh, and because the corners are boxed off, you don't need to take a pencil and flip it inside out.
Oh yeah, because that's what I was saying. If you don't box your corners and you're just doing a flat edge, there ends up being a lot of material left over on the inside. And then you have to do what you were saying, how you have to get like a pencil and really kind of finesse it to get it to lay right. But box corners, and I cut off that access material so they lay pretty straight. All right, so now we're almost done. We're on the final stretch. There's just one more seam to do, and that is closing off this edge. This is gonna be your only visible seam in the entire bag, and it barely counts as visible because it's on the internal lining, which, unless I pull your bag out, and really examine it. And I'm only gonna do that if you did something very, very wrong and I'm confused of how you got there. Which is fine. It's fine to do things wrong.
It would just be magic.
Yeah. All right, so I'm pinching my edge. I wanna make sure that there's enough material folded in for my machine to capture it, because the last thing I wanna do is for this thing to start unwinding on itself and just turn into a mess when I open the bag. All right, so it should be a nice straight line. So I'm gonna go on my machine. You could also, if you are using a cotton, you can use your iron to kind of flatten the seam down, just so you're not fighting it. This material is just, it's so thin.
Can't we also just like hand sew like a ladder stitch?
Yeah, you can do that. I don't know how to do that, but you're welcome.
You can also use the film adhesive.
Oh, the adhesive.
Yeah. So I am going to switch my needle over to the far right position because I want this to be as close to the edge of my material as possible. Drop the foot, insert my needle. So I'm gonna go forward, backward, forward. I'm so nervous about this. I don't know about you guys. I'm just checking my seam again. I'm making sure that there's no weird threadies because that's where I messed up that first time and things got a little weird inside. And I'm just making sure that everything's clamped down by the thread and nothing's gonna come out over time. So now if you look at my weird sock, everything's closed up, everything's good. So I could now push the inside lining inside. And you will need a pin of some kind. Where's my bag? My pins.
Okay, you still need to struggle with the pen.
You just need to get that internal lining all the way in there. Cool. So now everything's good, everything's in place. I'm just gonna use my iron right here to kind of clean everything up on all my edges, keep things sharp. That's all the iron is doing now, is just making things a little sharper.
And not to derail anything about that internal lining, but if you look at any of your backpacks, they don't have that. They actually use a binding tape on the edge, and they just cover the edge. Yeah.
Oh.
So they just cover their ends. It actually just like, so if this is my textile, they just put a piece that's over the end here, and they stitch that. And they don't give you the inner liner, they just cover those seams.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's how I taught myself, because I went to like PacSun and started flipping backpacks inside out. I was like, how do we put these things together? The person sort of walks up, what are you doing? Oh, I'm trying to figure out things. Like, sweet! So like, half the time you just go figure out how stuff is made, like, looking at it.
All right. So your bag has been made, everything's looking good. As Connor said, there are 1,000 different ways to do an internal liner. He said one, this is one. There's at least 3 more that I know about, but it all depends on your bag. Some of them you sew them totally separately, and then the final thing you do is you drop them inside and then you do a top stitch to put them all together. You sew basically all the way around. The only thing with that one is, again, you get a visible seam, which can make something look very nice sometimes with done right. With this bag, I wanted to show you all hidden. All right, so now this is good. All that's left to do is to put it in your flex frame mechanism.
What? What even Dude, that's so offensive. Why would you say that? I was not expecting that. You're so out of pocket. Last time was like.
So on one side of the flex frame mechanism, there's a pointy one. There's a pointy little edge here. This is going to be the most annoying part. It's going to get in your way as you push it through. It's going to snag on stuff. So that's why it's so important to make sure that you get the handle size right. And you really got to finesse it, and you got to do both sides at the same time. If you get one side in, you're never going to be able to figure out the other side, or it's going to be a lot harder. So you're doing both sides at the same time. They go through really great and smoothly until you get to the end where you folded that over. That's when you got to kind of finesse some things on both sides at the same time. You don't want to force it, because the last thing you want to do is to like accidentally catch that edge and then invert it, and then all that hard work is gone. Exactly. Cool. So I got it. It pulled out a little thread, which is fine. Nothing's gonna come undone because I got the adhesive working for me on the inside. It's doing its job. This one's all good. Got it all pulled around. And then the last thing that you want is inside this bag, there are these very, 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 very small little locking pins that you're gonna take and you're gonna drop it into your flex frame mechanism. And then that edge that I was just telling you about that has been a nuisance this whole time, and you're just like, why can't I just bend it out of the way? It's because that's what you need to lock that locking mechanism in place. So you drop it in, all the way down, and then you just bend over this very, very small tab right there. Hopefully you can see it in the camera. And then your bag is complete. I'm not gonna bend it over right now because I want to have as many parts for you guys to play with as possible, but it still works. Cool. So that's the bag. Just while we're here, I'm gonna show you one other sewing maneuver for if you are ever doing a turn on a bag, on a project. Again, I'm gonna cut my little. So like say if you're doing a tote.
It's so professional looking. Yeah. Like without the tag, it's just a bag. It's basic. It's just a bag.
Right? It's the subtle details that make it look nice.
Tag. Ooh, I bought it from like this cute little
Target.
this cute little pen store.
So, all right, here's the last little trick I'll teach you. This is not for this assignment. This is just for you to take with you. You go forward. Once you get to a point where you want to actually turn, you go and drop your needle, raise your foot with your needle still down, pivot it, and then drop your foot again. Now you got a perfect 90-degree angle right there.
That's cool. I haven't seen it.
Yeah.
You just lift the foot, train the material, and then sew this.
Yeah, the point is you just keep your needle inserted into the material so it pivots perfectly, and you have a very continuous seam, and you can do whatever angle sewing that you need to do.
If your needle doesn't land at the corner you want it to, you lift it, shift it, and put the needle down where you want it to, and then, right?
Yeah.
Like sometimes it'll stop short or be too long.
Yeah.
Stop short and just make that extra stitch a little
Yeah,
longer.
and you could totally hand wind this, like on stuff that you're really not sure about. You can go in backwards, and this will sew just like I'm pressing the pedal, no problem. And then I could go, oh, no, never mind, I want to go forward, get to the right area. So if you want, you can take a very long time and make this bag beautifully.
Manual.
Yeah, the old-fashioned way. With a machine. All right. Are there any questions on the bag or things that you might want to see again? I tried to write very clear directions and take photos. Be careful, the pin is not locked in, so it might pop out. Yeah. If you're gonna examine a bag, I recommend the one with the tag.
I thought you used magnets, not just.
No, I thought so too. I didn't realize it was like tension.
Yeah, just
You know, like the slappy.
Oh.
Yeah.
Instead of a ruler. Yeah.
the paper. Yeah. So when you go into the assignment, it should be posted on both classes. There's a link. Click the link, it'll automatically download the template. You print it out on 2 11 by 17 sheets of paper full scale, and it'll be perfect. Everything should be dimensioned just right. Again, if you plan on making this over the holidays, because we don't have Fridays, which I do recommend you guys get started. You can take the mechanism, and as long as your mechanism, when you do your print, and you do your frame tunnel, your mechanism should just pass these dotted lines. If it doesn't look like this, when you print out your template, it means that something happened with the scale. You're gonna need to go in and adjust something in your printer settings. All right, so you had a question.
What were you able to modify any dimensions? I thought you said.
Yes, so this dimension here dictates the height of the bag. So you're allowed to modify that one.
Just the length?
Just the length. You can also modify the angle, but this edge right here has to be for the mechanism, yeah. So like right now, this bag, it does kind of taper in because of the boxed angles on there. So if you did like a slight angle instead of doing it 90 degree, then when you box it, it'll actually bring it in, it'll be perfect. But that's to your discretion, whatever you want to do. Again, if your bag comes out and looks like this, then you did a fantastic job. If it doesn't,
Do better, try harder.
yeah, do better, try harder. Just keep trying. Yeah, I mentioned in the assignment, right, there's a careers dedicated to soft goods, there's CAD software dedicated to soft goods. So you're not gonna get it perfect your first time at it. Just try again. Any other questions? Cool. The only other demo I have is the flat patterning of a hard good. This should be off. It's gonna stay hot for like a year because it's old and dangerous.
You insert it, right, and then.
Yeah, so there's an edge on this. I'm trying to pull it out right now, but there's an edge right here.
Okay.
I wanna make a fish so badly.